My sweet child, come sit close, rest your head, and let the world fade away for a little while. Can you hear that rain gently tapping on the windows? That's the sound of the earth singing you to sleep. I've lit the old lantern here beside my chair. It casts a golden glow just like the one in the story I'm about to tell. So, close your eyes if you like, and let Grandpa tell you about a very special day long ago in a quiet village tucked between the hills and the trees. This story is about a boy named Eli and the little home where he lived with his grandma, in a cottage that always smelled like cinnamon tea and old books. Their home stood on the edge of the village, near the tall pine forest, with a little wooden fence that creaked in the wind. What made their home special wasn't its size, nor the creaky floorboards, but a small, round window in the attic, and the lamp they placed in it every night. You see, that lamp had a story of its own, passed down from many generations. It was said that it had once guided lost travelers through the thickest fog, warmed the hearts of soldiers returning home, and lit the way for lonely souls in the dark. Grandma always said, "As long as there's a light in the window, no one is truly alone." And so, every evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned violet, Eli would climb the attic stairs and light the lamp. Then he'd press his little nose against the glass and wait for the soft flicker to reach someone who needed it. And oh, my dear, this one day, the day I want to tell you about, well, something magical happened. It began like any other morning, with the rustle of birds and the whistle of the kettle. But by evening the wind began to whisper differently. There was a feeling in the air, like something or someone was drawing near. And Eli, well, he felt it in his bones. Now, I'll tell you more in the next part, but for now, just rest. Let your thoughts drift gently, like leaves on a sleepy river. The rain's still falling soft outside, and the story's just starting to bloom like a warm candle flame. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, the day the wind changed.
Eli had finished his chores early that morning. He'd fetched kindling from the woodshed, helped Grandma knead the dough for their crusty brown bread, and even swept the front porch with that old birch broom that always left behind more twigs than it picked up. But all throughout the day he felt strange. Not the kind of strange that makes you nervous, no. It was the kind that makes your heart feel stretched, like something's coming and you don't know what. But it's something good, something important. By mid-afternoon the sky turned a pale silver, and the wind began to blow from the forest, not sharply, but softly, as though it carried a secret. Eli sat on the back steps, hugging his knees and staring at the tall pines. They swayed gently, like dancers too old to move quickly, but still graceful in their way. Then he heard it, a sound, faint and distant, like humming. Not a bird, not the wind itself, but something in between. A song, maybe. It made the hairs on his arms stand up, but it didn't frighten him. No, it made him feel watched, but kindly, like someone was waiting for him. He didn't tell Grandma, though. She was busy by the hearth, her hands dusted in flour, humming her own little tune that always ended in a giggle. She wouldn't think much of it. Grandma always said the forest had its moods, just like people. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it shouts, she'd say, stirring the pot of soup with her favorite wooden spoon, the one with the little crack down the middle. But it always means something. That evening, Eli lit the attic lamp earlier than usual. The sky was already darkening, and the wind had picked up its whisper again. As he struck the match, his hand trembled just a little, not from fear, but anticipation. The lamp flared to life, casting a golden glow across the wooden beams of the attic. Outside, the pine trees bent their heads as though listening, and then something moved. Not in the yard, not on the path, but far down the edge of the forest trail. Just a shape, a figure, too far to see clearly, but there, standing still, watching, waiting. Eli pressed his forehead to the glass and held his breath. The figure didn't come closer. It just stood, bathed in the golden light of the lamp's reach, and then, slowly, lifted a hand. Was it waving? Eli blinked. The figure was gone. He raced down the stairs, heart pounding, not with fear, but wonder. "Grandma," he said, breathless, "someone was out there." "In the woods." But Grandma just smiled, not looking up from her knitting. "Oh, child," she said softly, "some lights call to those who are searching. Maybe tonight someone saw your light and remembered the way home." Eli didn't know what she meant. Not yet. But that night, as the rain began to fall, soft and steady, he dreamed of pine trees parting, of paths lit by lantern glow, and of a stranger's face he hadn't yet seen, but somehow already missed. The next morning, the world outside was soaked and glistening, the air cool and smelling of wet bark and pine needles. Eli had barely slept. His dreams were thick and swirled with golden light and voices he couldn't place. But one image kept returning, a man, tall, worn by time, with kind eyes and a heavy cloak patched from many colors. He couldn't explain how he knew the man had kind eyes, because he had never seen the man's face clearly, but some part of him simply knew. Downstairs, Grandma was humming again, rocking in her chair by the fire. She looked at him like she already knew what he was about to say. "Grandma," Eli asked carefully, "do you think someone was really out there in the trees?" She set down her knitting and gave him a long, thoughtful look, the kind that only grandmothers seem to have, like they're looking not just at your face, but all the way through to your thoughts. "Sometimes, child," she said gently, "the forest brings someone to you when your light is strong enough." "But who would come?" he asked, eyebrows furrowed. Grandma's lips curled into a small smile. "Maybe someone who's been walking a long time and forgot what it feels like to be seen." Those words stuck to Eli like morning dew on a spider's web. All day long, while he fed the chickens and mended the garden fence, he kept glancing toward the trees. He didn't see anything, no movement, no figure, but the feeling of being watched gently lingered, like a distant memory just out of reach. That evening, Eli lit the lamp again, this time with trembling hands. He stared long and hard into the dusk, but the edge of the woods remained quiet. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that someone was waiting. So, he did something he had never done before. He left the front gate open. He told himself it was for the wind, or the stray cat that sometimes wandered through, but deep down, he knew it was an invitation. That night, just as the rain began once more, soft as whispered prayers, there came a knock, not loud, just a soft, patient tap on the wooden door. Eli froze where he stood. Grandma didn't move, but her smile widened, eyes sparkling. "Well now," she whispered, her voice like warm tea and old secrets, "that took less time than I thought." Eli opened the door, and there he stood, the man from his dreams. Taller than most, with silver-streaked hair tucked beneath a tattered hood, and a long cloak made from hundreds of tiny patches, each a different color, a different story. His boots were muddy, and his hands were calloused. But his eyes, oh, my dear, his eyes were like a soft fire, steady and kind. "I saw your light," the man said, voice low and gentle, like leaves brushing together. "And I remembered the way." Eli didn't know what to say, so he stepped aside. Grandma nodded to the man, as though she'd been expecting him all along. "Come in," she said. "The soup's still warm." And just like that, the stranger entered their little cottage, carrying with him the scent of faraway places and stories too long left untold. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air seemed to shift, like the room itself exhaled. The rain outside grew softer, as if it were leaning in to listen. The man removed his hood, revealing a head of silver hair tied back with a piece of twine. His face was weathered, creased like old paper, but not tired. No, not tired at all. His eyes were wide and curious, and they flicked around the cottage like someone returning to a place half remembered. He stood there for a moment, quiet, simply taking it all in. The scent of cinnamon from Grandma's tea, the faint tick of the clock on the mantel, the warmth from the fire. Then, with a gentle smile, he nodded. "It's just as I remembered," he said, "peaceful, honest." Grandma pulled out the old oak chair across from her and motioned for him to sit. "You're a long way from anywhere, friend," she said softly. The man sat down with a sigh, the kind that carried years in it. "I've been walking a long time," he murmured, "and most places these days don't remember how to welcome a soul." Eli watched from behind the arm of the couch, wide-eyed, curious, and just a little afraid. But Grandma gave him a little wink, the kind that meant, "It's all right, love." She poured the stranger a bowl of soup, steam curling like soft breath, and placed it in front of him without a word. The man accepted it with gratitude, but before he picked up his spoon, he unclipped a small pouch from his belt and pulled something out, a tiny square of cloth, no bigger than a handkerchief, stitched at the edges and patterned with golden thread. He held it up to the light and smiled. "Each place I find kindness," he said, "I sew a piece into the cloak." Eli tilted his head. "What do you mean?" The man gestured to the multicolored patches that covered his cloak. "Each one tells a story. Some are stitched from scraps of a grandmother's tablecloth, some from a child's old blanket, some from the sleeves of a friend who once gave me shelter from the cold. Every patch remembers, and every light I've followed has led me to a place worth remembering." Eli stepped closer now, wonder blooming in his chest. "And you're going to sew one of ours?" "If you'll allow me," the man said with a nod. Grandma smiled, eyes misty but bright. "It's been some time since anyone asked to remember us." The man placed the cloth carefully into a pocket near his heart, and then, finally, he ate. They sat together for a long time that evening, the three of them, with only the wind and the rain as company. The man told stories, not loudly, not boastfully, but as if they were old songs he was humming back into life. of towns where the sky turned orange at night, of rivers that whispered names to those who listened, of a boy once lost who found his way back because a single light glowed in a window far away. And Eli, oh, Eli listened like never before. Eventually, the fire burned low, and Grandma rose to fetch a blanket. "You'll stay the night," she said. "That much is certain." The man didn't argue. He just bowed his head in thanks. As Eli lay in bed later, curled under the quilt Grandma had made from her own memories, he stared at the ceiling and listened to the rain. He thought about the man's cloak and the stories stitched into it, and in his heart he hoped that one day his patch, the one from their home, might be the one someone else follows in the dark. That night was unlike any Eli had ever known. He didn't sleep much, not because he was restless, but because his mind was alive, stirred by the man's stories, his patchwork cloak, and the mystery that clung to him like dew on grass at dawn. He listened from his bed to the low hum of voices downstairs. Grandma and the traveler were still talking long into the night, though their words were soft now, woven with silence between them, like threads in a tapestry. Sometime around midnight, Eli slipped out from beneath his quilt. He tiptoed down the stairs, the boards creaking gently beneath his bare feet. He paused at the bottom step, peeking around the corner into the sitting room. The man was there, sitting close to the fireplace, now burning low with sleepy embers. His cloak was folded across his lap, and in his hands a needle and thread, golden, glinting in the firelight. Eli watched in quiet awe as the man began to sew the little square of cloth he'd taken earlier into the cloak. His fingers moved slowly, reverently, as if the patch were made of something sacred. Eli's foot shifted, and the floor let out a soft groan. The man looked up and smiled, not startled, just expectant. "You couldn't sleep either," he said gently. Eli stepped into the room, his voice a hush. "I wanted to see you sew it in." The man nodded and patted the spot on the rug beside him. Eli sat down cross-legged, close enough to feel the warmth of the fire and the steady calm that seemed to radiate from the man. "This patch," the man whispered, eyes never leaving his stitching, "will sit near my heart. Not everyone does. Only the ones that change the path I walk." Eli blinked slowly. "Why ours?" The man tied off the thread and tucked the needle away. He smoothed the cloth with a palm, then turned to Eli, his eyes softer than ever. "Because your light wasn't just a signal, it was a welcome. Some lights ask for help. Yours offered a home." The fire cracked softly, sending sparks upward into the chimney like fireflies. Eli looked at the cloak now, seeing it differently. It was no longer just a garment. It was a journey, a map, a living story that carried kindness and memory across miles and years. Each patch, a person, a home, a choice. Then the man reached into his satchel and pulled out something small, a folded bit of parchment. He handed it to Eli. "When I leave," he said, "you'll find this again. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but when it's time. It will tell you where I went, and maybe you'll follow." Eli opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The weight of the moment, the hush of the night, the whisper of the rain, it all held him in quiet wonder. He simply nodded and held the paper to his chest. The man smiled and draped his cloak over his shoulders again. He looked taller somehow, the patches shimmering in the firelight like stars stitched into twilight. "Good night, Eli," he said softly. Eli whispered, good night. He returned to bed and fell asleep within minutes, the kind of sleep that comes not from exhaustion, but from feeling deeply, truly safe. The sun rose slowly over the hills, its golden fingers sliding between the pine branches and brushing against the cottage windows like a quiet good morning. The birds had begun their morning chatter, and somewhere far off a brook babbled with a little more cheer than usual. Inside the cottage all was still, until Eli awoke. He sat up quickly, heart thumping with the memory of the night before, the stories, the stitching, the promise of something more. He threw on his slippers, barely bothering to straighten his quilt, and bounded down the stairs 2 at a time, calling softly, "Grandma? Is he still here?" But the room was empty. The fire was cold. The chair where the man had sat was bare, and the scent of his presence, smoke, leather, and faraway wind, had already begun to fade. Eli's chest tightened. He raced to the front door, flung it open, and stepped into the crisp morning air. Mist clung to the earth like a sleepy blanket, curling around his feet and drifting between the garden posts. The gate still stood open, swaying gently as if it had just been used. He ran to the edge of the path, scanning the woods. No sign, no sound, just the whisper of the forest, old and eternal, carrying on as though nothing had changed, but everything had changed. Eli stood there for a long while, the cold morning brushing his cheeks, until a soft rustling behind him made him turn. Grandma was there, wrapped in her shawl, holding 2 steaming mugs, one for herself, one for him. She didn't speak at first, just handed him the cup and looked out at the misty trees. "He left before I woke," Eli said quietly. Grandma nodded. "He has his path." Eli sipped his tea slowly, eyes still searching the tree line. "He said I'd find a note one day." Grandma smiled, the kind of smile that holds 1,000 days of patience. "Then it will come, when it's meant to." They sat there in silence, sipping warmth, letting the soft weight of morning settle over them. The lamp in the attic was still lit, though faint in the daylight. Eli looked up at it and wondered, had it truly changed something? Had his light really helped someone find their way? Back inside the house, as the fire was rekindled and the day's chores began, Eli couldn't stop glancing toward the stranger's chair. He noticed something tucked between the seat cushion and the side panel, a small feather, striped and gray, soft as breath. He didn't know if the man had left it on purpose or if it had simply fallen from his cloak, but Eli kept it. That day passed slowly, gently, and though the stranger was gone, the house didn't feel emptier. It felt fuller, somehow, as if a bit of his spirit, of his stitched-up story, had woven itself into the air, into the wooden beams, into the very heartbeat of their home. That night, when Eli climbed the stairs to light the attic lamp again, he did so with a different kind of reverence. He struck the match, lit the wick, and stood still for a moment, watching the flame flicker to life. This time, he didn't wait for someone to appear in the forest. This time, he simply stood with the light and let it shine. The days that followed were slow and soft, the kind that felt stitched together like Grandma's old quilts, each moment warming the one beside it. The air grew cooler, and the pine trees began to let go of their golden needles, like the forest itself was turning a page. Eli returned to his chores, to his reading, to helping Grandma knead dough and sweep leaves from the porch. But something had shifted inside him, something he couldn't quite name. He didn't speak of the man often, not aloud, but his thoughts wandered there, often in the quiet moments, when the soup was simmering low, or the wind curled around the windows just right. He would glance toward the edge of the woods and wonder where the traveler had gone. Was he somewhere new now, stitching another patch into his cloak by a fire far away? Or was he standing in another attic, lighting another lamp? One afternoon, about a week after the man's visit, Grandma sent Eli to the old chest in the attic. She needed a bundle of cloth, something for a new quilt she was making for the coming winter. The attic was dustier than usual, the sunlight slicing through in golden beams. Eli pulled the chest open and began sifting through folded linens, old scarves, even a pair of his grandfather's gloves, still smelling faintly of cedar and thyme. And that's when he found it. Folded neatly between a stack of old pillowcases was a piece of parchment, aged, a little curled at the corners. His breath caught. He knew what it was before he even touched it. The letter. His hands trembled as he opened it. The writing was careful, looped, and full of kindness. To Eli, you will wonder where I've gone. I've gone onward, as I always do. But you've lit something in me I thought I'd lost. Hope. Not the kind shouted in crowds or written in books, but the quiet kind. The kind that glows in windows when the world feels dark. You have that light in you. And one day, when the time is right, you'll carry it farther than you know. Until then, keep your lamp lit. Eli held the letter close to his chest and sat there for a long time in the attic light, listening to the creak of the roof, the sigh of the wind, and the steady beat of his own heart. That night, he lit the lamp as usual, but he didn't press his nose to the glass. He didn't wait or wish. He simply sat by the window, letter in hand, and let the glow surround him. A quiet promise filled the air, not loud or urgent, but soft and sure, like a candle in the dark that never goes out. Because the truth was this: someone, somewhere, might be walking now, lost in a fog, and when they looked up, they would see his light. After Eli found the letter in the attic, something settled inside him, something deeper than joy, more lasting than surprise. It was a quiet kind of peace, the kind you only feel when you know you've been seen, truly seen, by someone who mattered. He read that letter every night before bed for a while, just once, just enough to feel its warmth light up in his chest again. But it wasn't only the words that stayed with him. It was the feeling they left behind. And that feeling began to shape the way he lived. You see, Eli began to notice the small things more than ever before. He noticed when the neighbor's old dog limped a little worse after rain, and so he stitched a little booty from an old sock to keep its paw dry. He noticed when the shopkeeper down the lane had stopped humming in the mornings, and so he left a tiny flower tied with a red ribbon on the man's windowsill, just like Grandma used to do. And every evening, without fail, Eli climbed the attic stairs, struck a match, and lit the lamp in the window, not with longing, but with love. It became part of who he was. Then one evening, something new stirred, as he cleaned the lamp's glass with a soft cloth, his favorite one, the one with blue embroidery from Grandma's younger days. He felt a bump underneath the base. Curious, he lifted the lamp slightly and found another letter, smaller than the first, folded tightly and sealed with a simple wax stamp, a patch-shaped symbol he didn't recognize but felt strangely familiar. With careful fingers, he opened it. Eli, If this finds you, it means your light is still burning. One day, you will be called to carry it farther than this home. The path won't be clear at first, but trust what glows inside you. When the wind changes and the trees begin to whisper again, follow it. There will be someone, someday, who needs you to be the light they see. The letter wasn't signed. Eli stared at the words for a long time, heart beating slow and strong, like the rhythm of rain on the old roof. He folded it again and tucked it behind his pillow that night, where dreams often wander, and as he drifted into sleep, a new thought curled around him, like a blanket made of stars and pine-scented wind. Maybe the man hadn't just come to find something. Maybe he had come to leave something behind, a purpose, a path, a promise. And oh, my dear, Eli was beginning to feel it stir. The days grew shorter, the air crisper, and the trees dressed themselves in gold and fire. The whole village began to shift toward winter. Chimneys smoked earlier in the day. The market sold more wool than berries, and Eli found himself reaching for his scarf each morning before stepping outside. But inside the cottage, the warmth remained, deep and comforting like fresh-baked bread. Still, even with the peace of routine, something had begun to stir in Eli again. It started one quiet morning while feeding the hens. The wind came, sudden and strange, not cold, not sharp, but warm. A whispering kind of wind, the kind that rustles through you, not just past you. It tugged at his sleeves, twisted through the garden gate, and danced around the attic window like it knew the lamp's glow. Eli froze. It was the same wind, the same hush that had blown in the day the man arrived. His heart quickened. He dropped the feed tin and rushed inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He burst into the attic, breath fogging in the cool air, and stood before the lamp, still unlit in the daylight, but somehow glowing. Not with fire, but with feeling. He opened the small drawer beneath the attic table where he kept the second letter, the one with the patch symbol, and read it again. When the wind changes and the trees begin to whisper again, follow it. He turned and looked out the round attic window. The forest was still, quiet, but he could feel something waiting there. That afternoon he told Grandma everything, not just about the wind, but the second letter, the pull in his chest, the strange readiness blooming like spring inside his bones. She listened without a word. Her knitting needles paused mid-stitch. When he finished, she smiled, slow and proud. "I wondered when the wind would return," she said. "It always does, when a light is meant to move." Eli tilted his head. But move where? Grandma leaned in and brushed a leaf from his shoulder, her touch gentle. "That," she whispered, "is something the wind will show you. Your job is only to listen." So that night he did. After dinner, when the dishes were cleaned and the cottage quieted, he lit the attic lamp once more. But instead of pressing his face to the glass and waiting for someone to arrive, he packed a small satchel, a bit of bread, a scarf, a folded patch of cloth from his favorite blanket, and both letters, just in case. He didn't know where he was going, not yet, but he knew the light inside him wasn't meant to sit still forever. Somewhere out there, beyond the pines, someone might be wandering in the fog, and when they looked up, they would need to see his light. The morning came with silver light and a breathless sky. Clouds moved low and slow over the village, quiet as secrets. Eli stood by the front door, his satchel slung across his shoulder, the weight of it unfamiliar, but somehow right. He wore his thick wool coat, the one Grandma had patched up last winter, with elbow pieces from Grandpa's old jacket, and his boots had been freshly polished, though the polish was already flaking where the toes curled up from use. Grandma stood beside him, tying a small bundle of food with twine, 2 slices of rye bread, a little wedge of cheese, and an apple from the tree out back. She didn't fuss over him the way some might. No, Grandma believed in quiet strength. She didn't say, "Don't go," and she didn't say, "Be careful." Instead, she placed her hand gently on his cheek and in her warmest voice said, "Remember, Eli, your light isn't the lamp, it's you. Take care of it." He hugged her longer than usual, burying his face in her shawl, breathing in the soft scent of clove and lavender. Then he stepped through the gate, the same one he had left open for the traveler so many weeks ago, and followed the wind. The forest didn't seem dark that morning. It felt like it had been waiting. The path curled ahead like an old ribbon, soft with pine needles and edged by mossy stones. Eli's boots made little sound, and above him the trees swayed gently, their branches whispering in a language he felt but didn't need to translate. He walked for hours, quietly, sometimes humming, sometimes not. He passed the old creek that babbled over stones shaped like puzzle pieces. He crossed a fallen log that had once been a bridge for squirrels, and now felt like a bridge into something more. And just when he started to wonder if he was truly going the right way, he saw it, a flicker of light, not bright, not blinking, just a soft golden pulse, in the distance, through the trees. Eli paused, his heart catching in his chest. He didn't run. No, he walked, slow and sure, as if drawn by a thread. The light grew closer, clearer. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't a lantern. It was a little glass jar, hanging from a crooked stick, with a tiny flame inside. And beside it, sitting on a rock, was a child. A girl, maybe a few years younger than him. Her knees were pulled to her chest, and her face was streaked with dried tears. Eli didn't speak at first. He simply stepped into the light and sat down a few feet away. The girl looked at him, startled at first, but then, slowly, her eyes softened. She didn't ask who he was or why he'd come. She just whispered, "I didn't know where to go. I just walked, and then I saw that light." She nodded to the tiny flame. Eli reached into his satchel and pulled out the lamp, the one he'd carried from the attic. It wasn't lit yet, but as he held it up, the wind circled them gently, like a lullaby wrapping around their shoulders. He struck a match. The flame caught, small and steady, and in that moment, something quiet and beautiful passed between them. Not words, not questions, just understanding. They sat together in the forest as the light glowed between them. 2 children, 1 lamp, and a world that suddenly didn't feel so big. She spoke it softly, like she wasn't sure it still belonged to her. Eli said nothing at first, just nodded, and together they watched the little flame flicker inside the glass jar she had found. It was nothing more than an old honey jar with a bit of wax and a string of cloth for a wick, but in the forest it glowed like something sacred. She'd told him how she'd wandered, not far, only from the edge of her village, where the roofs were low and the gardens small. But her village had felt too quiet lately, too full of shadows. Her parents had left for work in another town, and the house had grown lonelier with each day that passed. One morning, she had simply followed the wind. "I thought I was being foolish," she whispered, hugging her knees. "I didn't even pack anything, but something in me just needed to leave. I didn't know why. I just felt like maybe there was something out here, something waiting. Eli didn't smile, didn't interrupt. He knew that feeling too well, that tug in your chest, that quiet pull you can't explain to anyone else. "You weren't foolish," he said softly. "The light brought you here for a reason." Marin looked at him, her eyes wide and tired. "Did it bring you here too?" Eli glanced at his little lantern, now glowing beside them. The glass was smudged with fingerprints, and the flame danced gently, as if it too were listening. "Yes," he said, "it did." They sat there a while longer, the two of them, not speaking much. But it wasn't a silence that felt empty. It was a silence filled with understanding, like two puzzle pieces finding their edge. As the sun began to lower, turning the forest gold and blue, Eli stood and looked around. They couldn't sleep out here, not with the cold settling in and the wind curling closer to the ground. He scanned the trees until he saw it, an old hunter's lean-to just beyond the ridge, half covered in vines but still standing. He pointed it out to Marin. "It's not much," he said, "but it's shelter." She nodded and stood, holding her little jar close to her chest like a treasure. Together they crossed the mossy ground, boots squishing softly over fallen needles, and ducked into the lean-to. It smelled like earth and old bark, and a few dry leaves clung to the corners, but it was warm enough, and it felt safe. They sat side by side beneath the slanted roof, their lights placed together in the middle, Eli's lamp, Marin's jar. The two flames danced in rhythm, their glow overlapping, until it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. That night, before sleep came, Eli took out one of the letters from his satchel and read it again by lantern light. "There will be someone, someday, who needs you to be the light they see." He looked at Marin, curled up and finally asleep, her jar still faintly glowing beside her. And he knew, with no doubt at all, that this was why the wind had whispered, why the trees had called, why the path had pulled, because someone had needed him. And his light had reached them. "Ah, my little one, you're back again, just in time. Tonight the rain is softer than ever, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. Grandpa's been waiting here with another warm part of our story to wrap around you like a shawl on a cold night. Now close your eyes, breathe easy, and come walk with me into this next chapter." The days passed gently after that night in the lean-to. Eli and Marin moved through the forest, not like lost travelers, but like lanterns carried through the dark, together, steady, glowing from within. The mornings were filled with quiet laughter, the rustling of leaves underfoot, and shared pieces of bread warmed on flat stones beside their fire. They spoke softly and walked slowly, as if the forest itself had a rhythm they were learning to follow. The path didn't always seem clear, but Eli no longer felt uncertain. Each bend in the trail, each choice at a fork, felt less like guessing and more like remembering, as though the forest already knew they were coming and had been waiting patiently for their feet to touch its roots. And all the while the wind stayed close, whispering gently through the pines, brushing their cheeks, tugging at Eli's scarf like a friend who knew the way. One morning, after a long climb up a mossy hill, they came to a clearing bathed in golden light. It was a small meadow, quiet and still, with wildflowers leaning toward the sun and stones nestled in soft rings like sleeping animals. In the center stood a tree taller than any Eli had seen before. its trunk wide and gnarled with age, its bark silvered by time. But what took their breath away was what hung from its branches, lanterns, dozens of them, some rusted, some polished, some made from glass, others from old tin or carved wood, all shapes, all sizes, and each one glowed, not with flame, but with memory. Eli and Maren stood in silence. The meadow seemed to hold its breath with them. At the base of the tree was a small wooden box, carved with the same patch symbol Eli had seen on the second letter. He knelt beside it, opened it slowly, and found a small strip of cloth, just like the patches on the traveler's cloak. It was soft blue with gold thread running through it in the shape of a winding path. Maren sat beside him, eyes wide, whispering, "It's like the stories you told me, like the man's cloak." Eli nodded, fingers brushing the cloth with care, and in that moment something inside him unlocked, an understanding he hadn't reached before. The man hadn't been the only one with a patchwork journey. This place, this meadow, was filled with pieces of people who had walked before them, who had followed the wind, who had carried their light and left it behind for others to find. He stood, held the cloth to his heart, and then turned to Maren. "We're part of it now," he said quietly. "This isn't just where the journey brought us. It's where it begins for someone else." Together, they took their lanterns, Eli's and Maren's, and hung them gently on the lower branches. Their glow joined the others, dancing in the soft wind like stars stitched into the sky. Then they sat beneath the great tree, their backs resting against its strong trunk, and watched the light sway. That night, Eli dreamed of a new path forming, not one behind him, but ahead. And in the dream, others were walking toward him, drawn to the lights he and Maren had added. Each step they took was quiet but certain. Each heart carried a flicker of hope. And Eli knew, even in sleep, that he had become more than a boy with a lamp. He had become a keeper of the light. They stayed beneath the old tree for 3 days. It wasn't planned. It just felt right. The meadow welcomed them like a forgotten friend, the earth soft beneath their feet, the breeze gentle on their skin. They slept under the wide sky, ate what they had, and shared stories each night beneath the dancing lanterns. And in those stories, something beautiful happened. The forest began to feel less like a place they were passing through, and more like a part of them. On the second night, others came. The first was a boy named Tomas, carrying nothing but a small broken compass and eyes full of worry. The second, a girl named Alma, whose voice trembled when she spoke, but who sang in her sleep without knowing it. One by one, they found the clearing, drawn, perhaps, not just by the glow of the lanterns, but by the warmth that lingered around them like firelight on skin. Eli and Maren welcomed each of them not as strangers, but as fellow keepers of the light. There was no ceremony, no big moment, just a quiet understanding. You've made it, and you belong here now. Each person who arrived added something, an old scarf tied to a branch, a wooden trinket hung beside a lantern, even a folded paper star tucked into a hollow. The tree accepted them all, like a grandmother holding the stories of her children. And though no one said it out loud, they all began to realize this was something more than a resting place. It was a beginning. On the third morning, as the sun crept through the branches and painted everything gold, Eli stood up and faced Maren. "It's time," he said softly. She nodded. She'd felt it too. The same tug that had brought them here was now urging them forward. The lanterns would stay, and others would keep them burning. But there were other paths now, other forests, other hearts still wandering in the dark. They weren't leaving something behind. They were carrying it forward. Grandma's words echoed in Eli's chest as they packed up their few things. Your light isn't the lamp, it's you. They hugged the others, Thomas, Alma, the new boy with freckles and a quiet laugh, and then, with the same steps that had once trembled with doubt, Eli and Marin walked onward, deeper into the trees. And though their lamp was tucked safely in Eli's satchel, it no longer mattered whether it was lit or not, because they glowed now, with every step, with every breath. They glowed with the light they had carried, and the light they had become. And somewhere, in a home far away, an attic window still held a lamp that flickered each evening. Grandma still lit it, not out of habit, but out of love, because some lights never go out. So rest now, my dear one, let your heart glow quietly, knowing that you too carry a light inside you. And no matter how dark the path may seem, someone out there is waiting for it. When you're ready for another story, another night of rain and wonder, come back. And Grandpa will be right here. Good night, my little light. Sleep well.